Alright. Hello everyone. Sorry about that. So today's video is going to be about Powershell Basics and tips and tricks. Now, first off, as for me, when I code, the thing I guess I could say I have the most issues with is pretty much, I guess you could say, is formatting. So formatting's not really a thing I do. However, commenting is a thing. But let's get started on with the basics. So some of the basics you can learn from PowerShell is knowing what the commands are. So you have different types of commands, but if you want to know what commands you have at your disposal, you can just go in here and do the git command. And this will show you every single command you can run. And now you can get command git. So the verb, right? Most commandlets and commands start with either get, set, add, remove, new, and pretty much they are to give you an idea of what it's doing. So like get is like gathering information, set is like setting information, remove is removing information, adding, add, so on and so forth. I don't have to tell you twice about what words are and what words mean, but that's one way to look at it. So if you want a command, for instance, say I wanted to get process, right? So get process is one of those commands. It's kind of simple. It just gathers your computer's processes. Now, say I don't know how to use get process, which is in this case unlikely, but I'm a new user and I don't know how to use get process. I can use the get help command, which on get process. And that would tell you the name of the process, name, and so this is a parameter, and it's telling you it needs to be in a string format or an array of strings. Computer name is used for pretty much what computer you're comparing it to. So it's just a string, right? This is, I think it uses the RPC protocol if you're in a domain to communicate with other computers to get that information. Modules are pretty much DLLs that are loaded into the the process on loading. And then I guess file version info just gives you the file version. So these are switches, and switches are pretty much like an on and off switch. Either you run the switch and it does some other type of operation, or you don't run the switch and it does just the basic normal operation. And these are just different syntaxes. Some of these are kind of, so like this ID is I guess you could say, other than the fact that it's an integer, it is separate from these other ones. So like this computer name and this name are completely exclusive from each other. So you can't run the name and the ID at the same time. There's a couple things that this get help command does. It can give you a couple aliases. PS is pretty much what Linux software uses. So Linux uses PS. And then GPS is just the get process, GPS. It's just a shorthanded. So like for instance, I can just do GPS, hit enter, and I'll get my results. So now that we got an idea of how we can get a list of our commands and how we can get help for most of our commands, well, where do we start building? Well, a lot of the times when you start building, it's all about an idea and what you want to gather. So for instance, I want to get processes that have the name SVC host. That's a simple command, and all these other SVC hosts and so on and so forth. Right now, what you can do is you can also store these things in these objects called variables. Now, I'm going to show you exactly what that is. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to type up here. So a variable starts with a $sign. Now there are a few default variables that are your environment variables. So these are all the ones that are pretty much default in PowerShell that you can't really remove. And there are a few more. There's also the $null, $underscore, so on and so forth. So $null is just a variable preset by PowerShell to indicate, hey, this is an empty variable. There's nothing in it. And so it's more of used for comparison as far as whether or not the objects that you're comparing it to have a value or they don't have a value. It's just more of an ease of use rather than having to create your own. There's already one there for. Try adjusting it. Sorry, I'm trying to. Oh, lovely. Love it when technology doesn't work. All right. Oh, there we go. I think I kind of have to change the input of the mic. So, anyways, as I was saying, the $null is a completely empty variable. It's just to hold an empty value. Now, these objects can hold a wide variety of objects. I guess you could say these variables can hold a bunch of objects in them. So for instance, I'm going to name this one process equals get detect process. Now what that's going to do is that it's going to store that command in that variable. So every time I call upon that variable, it runs the process command. So it's very useful for commands that if you want to use them further along in your code, you can just call upon this variable and it just does it. Now a good thing about it as well, I can do .notate. .notate is more like getting me fields. So there's 259 processes running on my thing, but what if I think there's PS object dot properties. So a thing I was going to talk about is a hidden property. So these are properties about the properties. It's kind of weird, but as you can tell, I used the count and it gave me the answer 259. So this is pretty much trying to call upon all the properties all at once, in a way. But it's very useful to be able to sort the properties in other property fields if you want to create tables and hash tables and objects and arrays. That is a good way to manipulate the data to get specific field names that you want and the values. So for instance, if you want to check if the specific field or entity of that field is this 32 or something else, you can. So yeah, these objects can hold a bunch of information. They can hold, these variables can hold a bunch of information, like objects. It can hold even strings, like this is my string. And every time I call upon process now, it's going to print out not that. I'm dyslexic. So this is my string. Oh, no. Sorry about that. Oh. Man, this. Alright. I don't know if that's going to be any better. It's probably going to be worse. It's frustrating. Anyways, as I was saying, a lot of the times you can use these variables to be manipulative and manipulate the process, or not process, but the process of, I guess, doing your coding and scripting. So, for instance, I'm going to show you exactly. So, sorry, I'm gonna turn this up a little bit. Is that? I think it's a little better. All right. So to do this, oh man, why? There's so many microphones. Give me a second. Technical difficulties. Oh, of course not. If you guys have any suggestions on how to make this better, that'd be great. The mic is just being really dumb. Oh, lovely. I tilt it down. It doesn't understand. Come on. No. That's a big lie. I think it just doesn't want me to talk today. I move it slightly. It gives up. I thought we were talking about stuff. Alright, well, I think that's the best positioning I can get this mic. I think I could always change it to studio. See if that sounds better. I don't know. So, as I was saying, it can contain strings. So if you need it to be a string throughout the thing, you could be like write host. So write host is a command to just print out to the host. Just be like write host. It's also good for storing data. So like it can also equal a path. So when you're trying to be like, get child item path, I can also do that as well. So it's good for storing values that you can use further along your code. These values can vary from integers to Boolean to strings to a bunch of to switches. And there's a bunch of values you can store in these variables that the limit is to your imagination. 1 second. Sorry. So, anyways, also, so that's what a variable is used for. Now, so as you can tell, I'm using the ISE. Can I change the Alright. As I was saying, So these variables can store values. So ways to manipulate those values could be like get process. Alright, so if we make it $process equals get process. Now we can do $process, select name. What that's going to do is it's going to store get process into my process, and so this pipe, this straight line is what we call a pipe, and that's just to say, hey, run this and then pipe it into this next command, which in this command is select object. I used select on its own, so used to doing that, and the field I'm selecting. So I'm selecting a field, right? So if we do $process by itself, it gives you a list of fields. It gives you these process names, SI, ID, CPUs, WK, PM, MPM, and handles. These are the default values it will give you when you run the get process command, and these are the default columns and fields that it will show you. Now these aren't all of them. You can, since we have get process stored into this, we can pipe that to a select object, and so normally you can do property wildcard. So wildcard means everything and everything that is within the property range. So now it's going to select me all the property fields. So now you see all these extra property fields that go along with it. And the one I selected was the name, because I know the name one exists. Gives you all these property fields that you can select from. These are all the fields you can select. Now, pretty much that's kind of just basic stuff as far as variables, getting commands and help. There's probably a bunch of modules and commands you probably install. There's a lot you can get off of the Microsoft website, installing modules that you may want to test or try. A good site to test, or actually not to test, to find code on PowerShell is you can either use your normal YouTube, looking up videos, or you can look up stuff on a website called GitHub. And GitHub is pretty much, I'll actually show you. So GitHub itself is a website for coding, where people share their codes and experiences. So this is where all of my stuff is. And as you can tell, I have a few repositories of code itself. Some of them I have forked and some of them I have created. So I recommend just going through GitHub, just looking for anything that interests you and using that to your coding advantages. In that instance, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.